Hi everyone, this is Dr. Saucedo. I'm here today to talk to you about B-cardio and to give you a good representation of what it is, how it works, how it's different than other products in this category, and what an opportunity it represents for you, for me, for us together, to make significant change in the health of individuals on a global level. So with that, let me just begin. B-cardio is a nitric oxide boosting product, and it is focused mostly on cardiovascular health. But there are many other things that it does, and I'll touch on some of those. The problem globally with cardiovascular disease is that it's getting no better. In fact, it's getting much worse. Despite 50 years or more of efforts by people like me, physicians, researchers, governments, communities, all around the world, to try to control this horrible problem of cardiovascular disease. Despite the medications that have been innovated, the techniques, medical techniques, the procedures, the devices that have been innovated to address cardiovascular disease over the past decades, it has had no impact on the global incidence of cardiovascular disease. It's the #1 killer of people in the industrialized world. And as the industrialized world expands, as wealth grows, as Western habits are adopted on a wider basis, cardiovascular disease follows it. So it's a big problem. It's a growing problem, and nothing we've done so far on any level has had a significant impact on the devastation that the cardiovascular disease brings. So it's a huge issue, and therefore it's a huge opportunity, the way that I see it. There are many other disease processes that are growing epidemically, that are getting worse despite efforts to improve them. There are many. I'll touch on just a couple. There's degenerative neurological disorders, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. There is diabetes. Diabetes has become absolutely epidemic. The numbers of people suffering from prediabetes and diabetes is staggering, and it's growing constantly. It's a huge problem. And the consequences of diabetes are many. If you've got diabetes and it's poorly controlled over time, there's a huge risk of losing your sight. It affects the vessels in the back of your eye, the retina, and it can result in blindness. Another serious consequence of uncontrolled diabetes, or long-standing diabetes, is renal disease. You can lose your kidneys. They can stop functioning and put you in a terrible problem. So diabetes, with its growing numbers, is causing a lot of suffering globally. Peripheral vascular disease is another consequence of diabetes, where you begin to have poor circulation, mostly in your legs and your feet. You lose sensitivity there. Sores can develop, and ultimately, and not uncommonly, there has to be amputation to control the peripheral vascular, the sequela, the consequences of this peripheral vascular disease. Trauma is a growing problem globally. There are many factors that come to play in trauma and the consequence of trauma, healing processes, sexual dysfunction. In men, erectile dysfunction. Even in females and women, there are similar sexual dysfunctions. These are growing problems that have serious consequences on a social, psychological level and affect everybody. It's a very personal thing, but it's a growing problem, and there are many other things. I mentioned these few because nitric oxide, again, B-Cardio is a nitric oxide boosting product. If we can boost our nitric oxide levels, we can not only address cardiovascular issues, we can begin to address these other issues I've talked about. Human growth hormone levels begin to drop at about age 25 or 30. And the consequence of that, the aging consequence of dropping levels of human growth hormones are serious. Nitric oxide can help with that as well. B-Cardio with its nitric oxide producing effects can have dramatic impacts on all of these things and more. I don't want to cloud the issue, but I want you to understand that it is a cardiovascular, primarily a cardiovascular targeted technology, but that it has the potential, and this is based on strong, decades-long research. It has the potential, nitric oxide boosting has the potential to address these other issues. And as we talk more about B-Cardio and nitric oxide and its impact, I'll teach you more about how it can impact not only cardiovascular disease, which is a huge problem, as I've said, but other disease processes. It can help in many of them. So we've talked about all these disease processes, illnesses, sicknesses that can be helped by boosting nitric oxide. Now, why is nitric oxide so important? Well, it's a very simple molecule. Nitric oxide is just two atoms. It's in one nitrogen atom and one oxygen atom together. Very small. It's very volatile. It's produced throughout the body, and it exists for a fraction of a second. It does its job as a messenger, as an activator, in a fraction of a second. It's very volatile. The only way to really deliver elevated levels of nitric oxide is through nutrition. You can't effectively increase nitric oxide levels systemically by taking a pill or inhaling nitric oxide. It just is too volatile. It just is consumed almost the instant it hits the physiologic system. So the way to approach this is by providing the appropriate nutritional precursors, the nutritional requirements, the nutrition that drives the synthesis, the creation, the production of nitric oxide in the body. That's the way to do it, through nutrition. Now, in 1990, I want to say 1990, maybe 89, I'm sorry, but Louis Ignarro, Robert Furchgott, and Fareed Murad, three American researchers, were awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine for their work on the effects of nitric oxide on cardiovascular health. They had spent their whole career, decades, working on beautifully designed, beautifully published, eloquent, persuasive arguments about the effects of nitric oxide on cardiovascular health. And for that work, for their career work in that area, they were awarded the Nobel Prize, which represents to the Nobel Committee and to the world of medicine and to science the supreme effort, the supreme accomplishment of individuals working in a particular field. It's a big deal that this particular group of men working on nitric oxide and cardiovascular disease were honored this way. It represents the importance of cardiovascular disease as a global problem. So the issue becomes, how do we support the body so that it can produce the nitric oxide that it requires in order to help to prevent cardiovascular disease, to reverse cardiovascular disease, because it has that potential. It can not only slow down cardiovascular disease, those processes, it can reverse the damage over time. If you are supporting your body with the appropriate nutritional precursors and you're boosting your nitric oxide levels, you can remodel your entire vascular system. You can return it to a pristine state. And that is incredibly important to understand. If we can do that, if we can begin to return our body's vascular system to a healthier state and ultimately to a pristine state, the health effects of that can't be overemphasized. They're vast and amazing. So again, back to the question, how do we do that? Up until very recently, in fact, even currently, all nitric oxide products, nitric oxide boosting products, use amino acids. You'll see L-arginine, you'll see L-citrulline more and more commonly. And those are wonderful, and they do what they were designed to do. They activate the production of nitric oxide at the level of cells called endothelial cells. That's not important to understand now, except to understand that those amino acids help the body to produce nitric oxide levels in one part of the synthetic system. But the body has the capacity to produce nitric oxide at different sites, not exclusively through the amino acid, the L-arginine endothelium pathway. There are complementary pathways that are just as important, and they have largely been ignored. Precursors to activate, support, and drive these systems, these complementary systems for nitric oxide synthesis, are ignored. That's what makes B-cardio different. So B-cardio does have amino acids in it, and it helps to activate the L-arginine endothelial pathway. But it also has nutritional drivers to activate the remainder of the nitric oxide synthesis system throughout the body. And when this entire system is activated, it isn't just like 1 + 1. It isn't like that. It is a synergistic system. The system works in harmony in a beautiful way to drive health. If one part of the system, for example, if the L-arginine endothelial pathway is suffering for some reason, and there are many reasons that endothelial cells can become affected and become less functional, then the remainder of the synthetic pathways support it and take up the slack for it and actually protect it. And that goes both ways. So it's not just having one and then having another. Together they work to create a much greater effect. And it's critical that we provide the nutritional drivers to activate the entire system. That is what B-cardio does. That is the difference between the products that I'm aware of on the market that use amino acids to drive that one pathway, and B-cardio. B-cardio has a much broader attack on the problem, has a much broader effect on the systemic production, synthetic synthesis of nitric oxide. And so the impact of that, of activating the whole system, as I said earlier, is difficult to overemphasize. It would take lectures and lectures to explain it. But all of those disease processes and more that I described in the beginning, all of them, are impacted, are aided, are supported much more thoroughly, much more effectively when the entire nitric oxide synthesis system is activated in the body. We want to drive levels of nitric oxide up in our bodies. And we want to broaden the sites at which nitric oxide is produced. We want to activate the entire system. So that's a big difference. And again, it represents an opportunity. You know, I've worked in medicine. Geez, next year it'll be 30 years. You know, I went to medical school and studied radiology, and then later I went back and I studied genetics as a postdoctorate candidate and became affiliated with the National Institutes of Health. I've been deeply involved in many of the disease processes that confront the world, such as cardiovascular disease. My postdoctorate was done in something called angiogenesis. I won't get heavily into that, but it's the study at a minute genetic level of how vessels, our vascular system, functions, how it goes wrong in disease and how it can be restored, how it goes right in many processes, such as in the creation of human life. So that's my specialty. That's my partner's specialty, Dr. Bala Ambati. I've mentioned him before. Brilliant researcher. He was actually my mentor in my postdoctorate research and continues to be my partner. But Dr. Ambati is a tool for us. He's a resource for us. He stands as probably one of the top 3 physician researchers in the world in angiogenesis and its implications to eye disease, its implications to vascular disease, to cancers. This is a unique and special individual, and he's part of this team and represents part of the system that we have available to us to attack the problem of cardiovascular disease. He can edify us, he can support us, he can educate us. Hopefully I'm playing part of that role as well. And I want to just create some excitement about what an opportunity this is to have Beat Cardio and its revolutionary capacity to do something different to address such a growing and devastating process of cardiovascular disease on a global scale. So we have some of the best researchers, some of the truly the best minds in medicine available to us. We have an unprecedented tool to boost nitric oxide. We have another tool. We can demonstrate to ourselves and to other people who might be interested in learning about nitric oxide. We have a third-party testing strip that allows us to look at our levels prior to consuming B-cardio. We can look at it and demonstrate what the levels look like. Take the product and 20 minutes later, look at it again and see exactly what's going on physiologically and to show ourselves that, hey, this process is really working. That's kind of unprecedented in this space, in nutraceutical space, in network marketing space. It's even pretty unusual in medicine as well, but it's available to us. So we've got the brightest minds. We've got an unusual and amazing product that is special to us. It's a tool we can use, and we've got a way of demonstrating that something is actually happening. That we're really doing something that can be demonstrated. That you can sit across from somebody else and say, look, you know, I believe in this, and I've used it, and it's doing good for me. But let me show you. Let me demonstrate to you with a third-party laboratory test that it is doing something and doing something significant, you know, to help you. And hopefully in this way we can communicate the opportunity that we have, because I truly believe that we have the opportunity, if we work together, if we cooperate, if we communicate, if we educate each other, if we inspire each other, that we can step out into the world and we can make changes with our own lives, with the lives of our families and our friends. And as we share this, grow that influence so that we're affecting people in our neighborhoods and in our communities and in our states and in this country and beyond, to the point where we're really having effect on a global problem, a devastating global problem. And I believe that can be done. I believe with what we have at our disposal, given the the commitment and the earnestness that I have, and I believe you share, we can do this together. I have a passion for this. You know, nutrition isn't my primary vocation. You know, but it is my passion. I do it because I love it. I do it because I believe that through nutrition, better than anything else available to us, anything else, that through nutrition we can make changes that can affect the world. But it takes a big commitment. I'm ready to make that commitment. I invite you guys to join me and Dr. Ambati and do the same. I'd like to continue to talk to you and share a little bit more in detail next week about the other devastating disease processes that are growing epidemically. I touched on some of them. There are others. B-cardio, nitric oxide boosting can have a dramatic effect in many areas of disease. So with that, I'm going to just thank you very much for joining me. If you have questions, please just send them. To be perfectly honest, you know, I'm not that, I don't use social media a lot, but I see its power. And I'd like to open lines of communication with you guys and help you, support you, and join you in making a change. So with that, I'll say thank you, guys. Good night.